Welcome to Art Hacks. Today we are going to hack really two things. One, another way to make watercolor paint, and two, something I found in my kitchen, which is a whole collection of different sizes of forks. So we've done some different hacks with watercolor. If you don't have watercolor at your house, I showed you how you could make markers into watercolor. Well, today we're gonna make liquid watercolor using just some food coloring. So I got a little container here. I put some food coloring in here and a little bit of water, and you kind of have to play with the combination depending on the food coloring, how much water you add to get the color level that you want out of your paint. It doesn't make a ton, but you really don't need a lot either. So instead of using a paintbrush to paint with my watercolor today, I'm going to use a fork. So I saw this really cool video on the internet on how to do fork calligraphy, and I challenge you to try it, but I really struggled with getting it to look the way I wanted to because the fork just doesn't hold as much paint, but it's still super fun to paint with. So I've got plastic forks here. I've got all different sizes of forks from the drawer in my kitchen. All you're gonna do is dip that fork in there, and you wanna hold it the way that you would if you were gonna eat. So the curved part is facing down. That way, the paint that's being sort of held on the back of the tines here gets onto the paper. It doesn't seem to work as well the other direction. So you're just gonna set it down on your paper and pull. And you can see that it leaves behind this really fun trail of lines. And depending on how much paint it holds, you get different things. But I also started to notice that some of my forks are not really very even. The tines are off. So when I use this fork, I get a totally different design because not all the tines touch the paper. I have one that's missing, which then made me think, well, some forks don't even have 4 tines. They only have 3. So I could use a fork that has a totally different number of these on there. And that led me then to the plastic fork, because the plastic fork, I can actually alter, right? Because you don't want to be bending mom and dad's good forks at home, but a plastic fork, I could break one of the tines off, or I could break 2 of the tines off, and that would leave me then with something really cool to make my design with. The other thing I noticed is that the plastic fork tend to leave these little drips behind, which was interesting too, and it made a super fun design. So you could make all kinds of really cool line art just using forks, and there are a ton of artists that use just line in their work. There are lots of artists who've been inspired by the idea of line, like this piece here by Ian Davenport. He drips paint across his canvases to make interesting ideas and designs. This is a piece by Bridget Riley. She was known as an op artist. Her pieces often look like optical illusions, but all created with painted line. And then of course we have Pete Mondrian, who uses vertical and horizontal lines frequently, but then fills in some of the spaces with solid color. So maybe you might be inspired by an artist to add to your design. So let's look at one of those ideas. So let's take it a little step farther. What do you do once all those lines all over the page dry? So I'm going to take some colored pencil and go back and color some of these spaces in. But I thought it would be more interesting if I used a little value. So thinking about dark and light in there and adding one more idea to this hack to make it a little bit more interesting and to make it feel a little bit more like something other artists may have done, like Pete Mondrian, who often filled in some of the spaces in his work with solid color, which you could do, but I thought that the idea of value might just be a little more interesting. So, you know, you can always take these hacks and start one way and then start to go back and add other techniques to them to make them go a totally different direction. Try it out.